what we're talking about is how a husband's willingness to engage his wife's story. You remember from a couple weeks ago, we talked about when he's getting too far out in front. And when he's too far out in front, he's got to come back. He can't just be out there waiting for her to catch up and slow down. He's got to actually come back to where she is. And so that was our conversation. And I was saying, there's like this process, this evolution, if you will, of or stages of where husbands are in their willingness to come back and engage where their wives are. And as we talked about that, it kind of fleshed some things out in my mind, but it also helped me see that this is true as well in some of our own processes. Our willingness to engage where our wives are, but also for some of us, our willingness to engage where we are. And so as I was kind of fleshing this out and making some notes, I was like, man, I really want to talk about how to fix this and how to like expedite this. And that's where I kind of bumped into a wall. So today may be framing up, here's what it is and what it looks like. And I don't know if I got a lot of good answers on how to fix it at the moment. So we'll see about that whenever we get there. Okay. So having said all that, a little bit of intro, let's jump in. When I think of the willingness to engage or lack thereof, the first thing that I see is resistance. And for husbands on the call, all of us have probably experienced being here in some way, shape, or form. In our story, for Shelley and I, that was the first round of discovery, pseudo-discovery. 9 months prior to everything coming to light, Shelley had confronted me about what she suspected was going on. And in that space, I had said, you know what? This is a lie. So here's what's going on, and I lied, and that's behind us, and that's not happening anymore, and so we don't need to talk about it. We're not going to do anything with, like, we're just shutting it down and moving forward. That was how I responded to her at the time. And she genuinely, sincerely would say, hey, let's just talk. We'll work through anything. Like, we'll get there. Like, I just need to understand. And I'm like, no, you don't need to understand. Forgive and forget. Move on. Let's go. And so that first space was really characterized by resistance, where, like, the heels are dug in. That's kind of how I think about it. You won't convince me that I need to work upstream. You won't convince me that I need to come back to where you are. You won't convince me that I need to look at my own stuff, right? That resistance shows up in the way people engage their own process with historical work, right? Like, well, I'll hear somebody say, you know, I'm not going to look at my family of origin. I don't need to look there. In fact, my dad's dead. He was a great man. I'm not going to disrespect him by going back and looking at his faults or trying to find fault. And it's like, okay, so your heels are dug in. You don't see any value in that. You won't even entertain that there might be value in that. And at this point, you won't allow someone to say something different to you. Your heels are dug in, right? And biblically, there's a couple of things for this. There's one in particular that I appreciate. Because what we're talking about here is like an obstinance or a stubbornness at this point. And I don't say those words in like a derogatory way. I say them more in like an explanatory way. For some of us, that's where we are. We're just obstinate. And there's a particular verse in of Isaiah. It says, I know how stubborn you are or were. Your neck muscles were like iron and your forehead was like bronze. And I think that's a really good like depiction. Just even the physiological representation. Some guys, whenever we're resistant, it's like, you know, neck muscles are just clenched right there. Like, you won't convince me to turn and look in any direction. I'm just right here. And you can beat me over the head as many times as you want with what you need, and it is not going to affect me because I got a chrome dome, right? Or forehead of bronze is the biblical way of saying it. Like, just dug in. Just dug in. There's also in the resistance space, what I see over and over again is when somebody's in that resistance space, they're also, we need to turn that a little bit. There's also like this, I'll call it an arrogance that underscores this idea of like, prove it. Like there's this sense of sitting back going, you, Jason, have to prove to me why that's important for me to do. And until you convince me, until it's like so clear that it's unarguable, I'm not moving, I'm not budging, right? Stiff neck, right? And we over here, just so you know, and for husbands, I'm speaking y'all, when we over here, when we feel that from you, like you're sort of going, yeah, convince me, we know that you're not ready to move forward, as painful as that is. And we try over here to figure out a different way. How can we convince him? How can we show him and like maybe paint the picture in a different way, use different language and metaphor and da-da-da-da. And maybe the empathy masterclass will help. Man, it's hard, it's uphill, right, when you're in that place. And wives start to, I see. So y'all remember, every time I talk through some of this stuff, it's like, this doesn't fit. One size does not fit all, and one description doesn't fit every wife, okay? But I see typically for wives in that is either increasing, let's say, increasing anger. A wife gets more and more animated and more angry and more like trying to get him to move and just, would you please just, and there's like that, which then oftentimes leads to exasperation. And ultimately there's a hopelessness. A lot of wives hit hopeless when their husband is in resistance because she spun her wheels so long, she tried so hard in so many different ways, and redemptive living is the 9th stop on this recovery train, and it's like the resistance is so hard, so thick, so strong that it starts to lead a wife to that hopeless place. Right? I had a husband that I talked to recently. He's like, look, I just don't understand why she keeps going there. She has to rehearse it and bring it up, and she just wants to keep, and it's like she's just beating me over the head with it. And what she's doing is not beating him over the head. She's trying to get him to budge off of his resistance. And sometimes she comes at him and goes, you're a fill in the blank, and how could you, and why would you? And sometimes she comes over this way from the back door, and she's like, it would mean so much to me if you would just, and I know that you're a good man underneath there, and if you'll just take a step and do what they're asking you to do. And he's going, would you just stop? But she's going, I can't stop because I'm dying for you to take a step. Okay? So there's the resistance. Next, I see a move from resistance. My heels aren't quite as dug in, but that takes us over to indignance. And in definition-wise, if you're not familiar with indignance, here's what the definition is. Feeling or showing anger because of something unjust or unworthy. Feeling angry or showing anger because of something that I deem unjust, like this is not fair, or unworthy, like this is a waste of time. A lot of guys that move into indignance are in a place where this is my characterization of it. I'll do it. But you'll pay for it. I'll do it, but you'll pay for it. You need me to come back there where you are and be in that like painful place with you. I'll come back there, but you're going to pay for it when I do. Somebody will pay for it if I have to do this. Again, because the belief behind it is like this is ridiculous or this is unfair. Okay. I heard this recently with someone working on disclosure. Why do I have to write out my whole story, especially what preceded her? Like that's not a worthwhile endeavor. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter what happened before her. Or why do I have to write out the details of what I've done? That's not fair. She doesn't have to write her story. So I'll do it, but I'm going to make you pay for it if I do. Right? And I also think biblically, I'll get on a soapbox here for a second. There's a couple different places in the Bible, one particularly in Jude, where it talks about when we don't understand something. Basically, it says what these people don't understand, they scoff at, and the word behind there is, you guys know me in Greek, we don't get along so well, but blasphemeo, like blaspheming, and the definition that's used in there is to rail at. And gosh, this again, I'm like so guilty. I go back in our story and I'm railing at what I'm being asked to do. You want me to sacrifice that and give up that and be rude to someone in public? You want me to get rid of internet and stop mountain biking? Like, how dare you? I'll rail at something I don't understand. I'll blaspheme something I don't understand, right? And when somebody gets into this place, normally their motivation, I'm trying to think of how to say it. It's like their motivation is like placation, and I'm going to say consequence management. We'll go with that. Consequence management. Like, okay, I'll do that so I don't get in trouble. Right? I'll do that so that Jason gets off my case. I'll follow through on whatever the thing is so that you're not mad at something else. Those kinds of things. Sometimes I'll see guys in the indignance place do whatever it is in their own work or in going back to their wives' work. I'll see them do that thing so that they've got a chip for later. They've got a lever to pull later. That, like, sometime down the road, hours, days, weeks, there's some request made of him. There's indignance. This is ridiculous and not fair. And then he'll go, well, I already did fill in the blank. Like, I got my get out of jail free card. I'm playing that token because I don't think this is something I should have to do. Right? And so it becomes a lever to pull later for manipulation. And I think for a lot of wives, this space is very misleading. And some of y'all, you've lived this, so you can explain it better than I can on a wife's side. It's very misleading because, yeah, he's going kicking and screaming, but he's doing it. And that feels like it feels like the gap between here and here is so unbridgeable that when he actually does do something, even though it's because he's managing consequences and trying to get me off his back, it's like there's an infusion of hope. There's an exhale. There's this sigh of relief of like, oh, maybe we're going to get somewhere. And as a husband, it's important for you to know, if where you are is just placation, if where you are is in that indignant place, your heels aren't dug in. You're not absolutely resistant, refusing. But if you're in this place where you're like doing consequence management, I'm just kind of doing it because I have to, you're giving her false hope. And back over here, anger turns to exasperation, turns to hopelessness. Over here, the hope, this, I don't know how to explain this very well, but I'm going to try. This is like I can't really see. This is like a stair step. It's like the bottom just slowly erodes and we keep going down towards this hopelessness. Like da 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 da. Okay? Over here, the indignance, if you come from resistance and hit indignance, and then you don't continue moving forward, you stop here, what happens for a wife is it's like this thing goes down and then it's like, oh my gosh, we might actually be able to get somewhere, and then it's off a cliff. It normally, it's not every time, y'all. Normally for a wife, the stair step turns into hope, and then when she finally goes, oh, and it's usually not super obvious. There's a tell. He'll make some comment or say something, or one of us will say something, and the light bulb goes on for her. She goes, oh, you're not really in this. You're just doing what I'm asking you to do and what the guys are asking you to do. You're not self-motivated. You're motivated by placating and staying in the house or getting back in quicker or whatever. And then it feels like the hope goes off a cliff. Right? So if that's where you're living and not moving forward, you got to know you're giving her false hope. Okay? We were talking about this on a collaboration call earlier, and the image in my mind is like Jesus walks up and goes, hey, friend, do you want to get well? And a guy who's living here or here kind of looks at Jesus and goes, bro, I ain't sick. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, oh, that's so painful to think. You're so close. And if you're here, you're close. You're close to getting there. But if you stay there, it's going to go south. Okay? And it's going to be really painful for her when she realizes the bottom falls out. Okay? Some wives, I take it back. Some wives, I don't take it all back. Once they get here, once they move from there to there and they get here and they get up here to the false hope, the bottom falls out, the hopelessness hits in a deep way. But for some wives, they also feel relief because they feel released. A lot of wives, when this happens, go, okay, now I know I can't stay. And then that's where we see the divorces happen, right? Here too, for sure. But you teed me up and you let me think we were actually going to move, but really, yeah, that's a really painful place. Okay, keeping going. I'll talk about the last couple. And I didn't say this in here, but there's also usually, in this thing, there's usually also hostility. For a lot of guys, there's just anger, there's bitterness and resentment around what you're making me do, again, perceived injustice, and there's usually hostility about it, right? A wife will go, hey, did you do the homework that Jason asked you to do? Yeah, why? I did it. You didn't think I'd do it? That kind of thing. Or we'll get to session and go, hey, let's talk about the homework, and it's like, didn't do it, and then she goes, oh, you didn't do it? And then he's going, I had 14 things to do, and our car broke down, and da-da-da-da, and all of this, and and there's usually hostility that comes with that place, okay? Alternatively, when we get over here into willingness, there's usually not hostility. There's usually not hostility. It's not contentious at that point. It's still uphill. And I'm not saying like there's this, it's not the resistance, but it's still uphill. There's still some feeling of like, you can tell there's still an external motivation, right? It's not consequence management, like I'm just doing this because she and Jason said I had to or whatever. It's not normally that, but you can tell there's still some kind of grind in it, okay? I'll also say that external motivation for a lot of guys in this space is a sincere, it's a sincere, she needs me too. And here's what I mean by that, is like when we think about, he's too far ahead and he's got to go back and be where she is, or he's got to connect to her pain and empathy and that kind of thing. There's a sincere, like, she needs me to, so I will. I'm willing to. Like, of course I will. She needs it. But there's not a belief that I need it. All right? Like, I don't know how else to say that, but I don't believe I need it. So in that, usually the engagement at that place doesn't happen without somebody's external prodding, right? That's a wife going, hey, can we talk about X, Y, and Z? Or one of us going, hey, let's talk about X, Y, and Z. Let's crack the can open on whatever that issue is at y'all's house. And it's the pastor, it's the accountability group member or leader, it's somebody outside going, hey, maybe you ought to take a look at that. The same thing on the self-work. It's somebody outside going, hey, man, you might want to take a look at what's going on there. Whether that's family stuff, that's backstory, that's upstream, however you want to phrase that. But it's normally not me of my own volition going, hey, maybe I ought to look at that. It's externally motivated and prodded somehow, okay? I don't want to miss and overlook, though, that as it pertains to the wife, like going and connecting with where she is, engaging her trigger and, whatever that is, it usually is sincere. Over here, it's I'm doing it because I have to. Over here, it's I'm doing it because I do want to. If that's what she needs, I'm willing to do that. And this, y'all, is what I would say is I wish I had a better green because y'all can't see green. This is if you're from Colorado and you've gone hiking, there's something called a false summit, right? Where you hike like a 14,000 foot peak, but somewhere around like 13,500, you crest and it's like you could see the top, and you crest and then you're like, oh, you couldn't see the real top, right? This is a stuck place. It's like a false summit. It's a place where I would say people who stay in the willingness survive. Their marriage survives. They survive the destruction caused by their acting out, etc., etc. It's also like, I would say, the easiest place to get stuck and like this holding pattern where both people ultimately find themselves going, is this all it is? I mean, it's better. It's not horrible. But like, is this all? Is this? And we talked about this on a collaboration call earlier too. Like, the best it's going to get is that it just doesn't suck as bad. Like, oh, that's survival. Like, we made it. Mostly. It's not as bad as it used to be. Right? And this is the easiest place to get stuck. Where a husband, as it pertains to his own process and to his wife's process, gets into willingness. I sincerely go there if she needs me to, but I don't believe that I need to. Okay? Which is dangerous, because we're not saying like mediocre living. That's not the name for a reason. We're not looking for mediocre, which is what's going on in here. And I'll also say, for a wife who had a husband that started here, when they get here, there is a season, days, weeks, months, years even, that this feels really good. This feels like it's redemptive in this place because it's so far from where we used to be. He willingly did disclosure. He willingly engages my triggers when I bring them up. He willingly goes to his support group, but it's not redemptive. It's mediocrity. It's better, and for a lot of wives, it feels so much better. It feels like it, but it's not, because where we're going, big picture and long run, if we, where we want to go, right, is to eagerness. We want to go to eagerness, which is not only not hostility, right? And it's not uphill at all. It's like internal motivation. Oh, I don't changing up markers on us here. Internal motivation. It's I believe I need to, whether anybody else wants me to. Right? This is somebody who goes, I don't like that thing that in me. I don't like that character trait in me. I don't like the way I respond in those situations. I need to look at what's going on with me. I need to look at what's going on with me. And whether you as a wife want me to, or my counselor wants me to, or my coach, or my pastor, or my sponsor, whoever wants me to, doesn't matter. because I believe I need to do that work. You know what? You're triggered. I need to enter that trigger space with you. I need to be the one to bring up the triggering thing because I believe I need that. Yes, you too, of course. But the kind of man that I'm going to be, I believe I need to do that thing. There's a very distinct internal motivation that shows there, right? And I think, obviously that emanates from a genuine desire to be different, but it also comes from a place that says, y'all heard me talk about this in an old webinar, I'm no longer measuring down. Right? I don't know how to do that other than like draw a big red line through it. I'm no longer measuring down. This is characterized by measuring down. And here's what I mean by measuring down. It's better than it used to be. It used to be this bad, and now it's so much better than that. And the rubric that I use to define progress is how much better than bad it was, which on some level is a really terrible measuring stick, right? We don't want to keep measuring down. We don't want to measure against how bad it used to be. We want to acknowledge, I'm not saying don't acknowledge, I used to be that bad and now it's so much better. I'm not saying don't acknowledge it. What I'm saying is that can't be the measuring stick. We're always measuring up to who God is calling us to be. And if you haven't watched the webinar on Be Perfect, I don't remember what it's called. Be Perfect as I am perfect, which doesn't mean mistakeless. That video explains what we're shooting for, right? We're measuring up to who God is calling us to be. And when I think about that in our context here, let's put that up there. Measuring up means I have to look at what's going on inside me in order to become everything that God is calling me to be. All right, I believe that within myself. If Jesus goes, hey friend, you want to get well? Pick me first, because I know that I'm sick. I may not even know what all kinds of sickness I got, but I know I got stuff. It may be sickness around integrity, or sickness around money, or sickness around sickness, or sickness around parenting, or sickness around husbanding, or being a good son, or a good son-in-law, or I don't even know the areas I might be sick, but pick me first, right? That's like the eagerness. That's the zeal, one of those biblical words, the zeal that says, I want to get well. I don't know what it's going to take. I might find some people to crack open a roof and lower me down into it. I don't know what it'll take. Somehow I got to get to well. I got to get to whole. I got to get to who God is calling me to be. Right? And that, so going back to this thing, that's where thrive happens. Right? That's where thrive. That's where this is the space where redemption happens. Where things are better than they used to be. Not only are, Thomas likes to say a lot of times, we got to set a higher horizon. Right? I'm measuring up. I'm looking for a higher horizon. I'm setting my eyes on something bigger and farther out there that God is calling me to. This is where redemption happens. This is where a wife, not only does she exhale, but she starts to go, holy cow, I didn't even know. I mean, I knew, but I didn't even know. I knew you were a good man behind all of that stuff, but I didn't know that it could be like this. Right? That's where redemption happens. I see this, y'all know, two answers to every question. Part one, I see this as a progression, for sure, but I see it as a progression across multiple layers. It's almost like, if I think in terms of, we'll go over here because I'm running out of space. If I go over here, I think in terms of layers, my art breaks down, right? You almost go resistant, indignant, willing, and eager on a layer. And then you kind of like break through that layer, and it's, some guys almost start over again on the next layer. And then you kind of go through it, and then you come down to another layer. And I think there's, I'm applying this to my own story. I think there's a part of this that's like the first layer. Well, this goes back to integration, honestly. There's part of the recovery process has these stages of like, I have to extract the unhealthy, dark, shadow, broken character, addict, whatever language you want to put. I got to extract that part of me. So it's like this is the old me, if you will. Well, the old me is really two people. The like new good man that's in there, and it's also the unhealthy, broken. Let's just call it broken man, right? I have to extract that part of me, and that's like identifying all the brokenness and the addict and the dark and shadow, you know, whatever language you want to use. I got to extract all of that, and I get, because the old me, this guy is driving the bus, right? So I got to extract that so that I can start to identify who I really am and who's kind of that imposter part of me that's been driving the bus out of the brokenness. I got to extract. That's like early recovery is extracting that. So we'll call that early, right? And then kind of mid recovery, if you will, is doing the work of developing. I'm having a hard time articulating this, partly because I'm making it up as we go to try to explain it. Mid recovery is like I develop this guy. So you know, the new man kind of gets developed and like grows, and I'm starting to grow in character. I'm being more humble and tender and loving and empathetic and patient and self-controlled, and you know, name fruits of the spirit. It's that stuff. It's this guy is developing, but he's also learning what this guy is about. So the first early is like extracting them. And then this mid is like really being able to understand how this came to be. The broken guy has, you know, all the kid stuff in it. My drawing is breaking down, but you guys are following. It has the kid stuff in it, and it has the abuse stuff in it, and it has that first marriage in it. All right, I don't know in your story personally, for everybody on the call. I start to understand why the brokenness and who that actually isn't a monster. That's not actually a stupid pervert. He's not an idiot. That's a broken thing. And what I was doing was born out of that, and how I facade and mask up and all of my intimacy, aversion, that stuff is born out of all of that. And then late, I don't know how else to draw it in terms of this happening, but if you think about applying our principles, I almost go resistance, indignance, willingness, and eagerness to do this like separation. And then I kind of got to cycle back through all of those as I'm developing the new man and looking at why the old man is what he is. And then there's like another iteration of that when I bring those two back together into a whole man. The reintegration in late stage recovery. I know for some of y'all are like, what the heck is he talking about? I'm sorry, we'll get there. The reintegration of late stage recovery is bringing both of those guys back in with the new man of character driving the bus, and that old broken guy present with a compassion for him in the driver's seat, kind of a lockdown, not in a rude way, but like you just don't get a voice and a say on where we're going, what we're doing anymore, how fast we're going, or anything else. But you're there, you're not just gone, and there's compassion towards that. And we almost go through these stages iteratively through each layer of or stage of integration and recovery.